We've all been there, right? Staring at that overflowing bin, feeling kind of guilty about the planet and all that. It's easy to get bogged down by all the doom and gloom headlines about trash.
Yeah, it feels like every time you turn around, there's another report about landfills overflowing and plastic in the ocean.
Exactly. But what if I told you there's a solution brewing right under our noses? One that's not just tackling this global problem, but actually changing how we think about waste entirely.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Today's deep dive takes us to Indonesia, where a homegrown technology called APS is quietly changing the game.
APS, I'm not familiar with that. What does it stand for?
It stands for Alat Pimusna Sampah, which basically translates to trash-destroying tool. Catchy, right?
Straight to the point. So what makes this APS so special? Is it some kind of high-tech, super complicated system?
That's what I thought too. But our sources point to something surprisingly simple. We're talking research articles, first-hand accounts, even economic analyses. And you know what's really interesting?
What's that?
This innovation wasn't born in some fancy lab, but from a very relatable problem.
Okay, now you've got me curious. What kind of problem are we talking about?
Picture this. A dad, frustrated with his baby's ever-growing pile of diapers. Sound familiar?
Yeah, I think every parent can relate to that.
So how does a mountain of diapers lead to a breakthrough in waste management?
Well, this dad asked a simple but powerful question. What if we could safely get rid of trash right where it's created, at the source?
Instead of relying on garbage trucks and landfills.
Exactly. He envisioned a system that could handle waste on a smaller, more localized scale.
And that's how APS was born.
That's right.
Now, when I first heard about APS, I have to admit, I pictured some giant, complicated machine. But our sources say it's actually quite simple, even non-electric.
Non-electric. And now that's interesting. How does that even work?
Right. That's what threw me for a loop. How can something so seemingly low-tech handle something as complex as waste disposal?
It's amazing what a little ingenuity can do. The key here is something called plasma gasification.
Plasma gasification. Okay, now you're just using big words to sound smart. Break it down for me.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. Basically, APS uses a combination of clever design and readily available materials. We're talking things like used cooking oil.
Used cooking oil, like the stuff I'm supposed to be recycling but sometimes ends up down the drain.
Yep, that's the stuff. They use it to create superheated plasma.
Hold on, plasma? As in the same stuff that stars are made of?
You got it. Although in this case, it's on a much, much smaller scale. Plasma, often called the fourth state of matter, has some really unique properties.
Okay, I'm following so far, but how do we go from used cooking oil to star-powered trash destruction?
Basically, APS uses the heat generated from the oil to reach crazy high temperatures and pressure inside a sealed chamber. This creates the perfect conditions for plasma to form.
So you're saying we've got this superheated plasma chamber. What happens when you toss in, say, a week's worth of leftovers?
Well, picture this. You're using intense heat and pressure to break down trash at a molecular level. It's like vaporizing your garbage, leaving practically nothing behind.
So it's like a superpowered science oven that vaporizes your trash. That's wild.
It's a pretty apt description, and the elegance lies in its simplicity. That's a key takeaway from the source material, you know? APS isn't just a new way to deal with trash, it's a whole new perspective on waste management.
We've been talking about circular economy. Is that where this ties in?
Absolutely. Remember how APS breaks down waste on a molecular level? This plasma gasification leaves behind a tiny bit of residue, about 1% of what you started with.
1%? That's almost nothing. What do you even do with that? Is it even waste at that point?
That's the cool part. This isn't your typical landfill stuff. It can be processed into usable materials, like paving blocks, even components for fertilizer.
Wait, so you're telling me my leftover dinner could end up paving a road?
Sounds crazy, right? But that's the beauty of a circular economy. Waste becomes a resource, not just something you throw away, and APS shows how to actually do that.
That's incredible. And it's already happening in Indonesia. But let's talk about the people behind APS. What can you tell us about them?
Well, our sources point to this innovator, Kang Teddy, as the driving force. We don't know tons about his background, but it's clear this guy's passionate about practical, sustainable solutions to real-world problems.
Which brings us back to those diapers. Amazing how a simple problem led to this tech. But inventing's one thing, getting people to use it's another. How did APS go from a small workshop to, well, something bigger?
That's a great question, and our source material digs into that. Initially, people were hesitant. I mean, plasma gasification sounds pretty futuristic,
I
right?
can imagine. Not exactly something you hear every day.
Yeah.
So how did they overcome that skepticism?
Seems like live demos were key. Once people saw APS in action, how efficient it was, how little smoke, minimal residue they were sold.
The old seeing is believing. But it wasn't just about showing off the tech, was it? Sounds like they really made an effort to connect with communities and address their concerns directly.
You nailed it. It was about integrating APS into people's lives, their communities. The source material emphasizes education and transparency. They went straight to the people, explaining it simply, answering questions, addressing concerns head on.
That direct approach can make all the difference, especially with something new that might seem disruptive.
Exactly. And it seems particularly effective in Indonesia. Strong community ties, people used to working together.
Speaking of communities, one thing that stands out about APS is how it can empower communities economically. You mentioned a village turned APS into a business, right? Tell me more about that. How does it actually work?
It's a perfect example of technology doing social and economic good. This village, like many others, struggled with waste. They saw APS not just as a way to get rid of trash, but to make something valuable from it.
So they turned a burden into a resource.
Exactly. They set up a system. Residents bring their waste to a central spot with an APS unit. Waste is processed. The tiny bit of residue is used for things like those paving blocks, which they can sell or use for local projects.
So they solve their waste problem. A&D create income. That's amazing. Seriously, it's like, why isn't everyone doing this?
Right. It really makes you think. And it's gaining traction. Our sources mention other villages looking into similar projects.
That's really cool. It's not just cleaning up, it's about building something better. And that reminds me that the source material also talked about APS for disaster relief, right? Seems like a perfect fit when waste becomes even more of a critical issue.
Totally. Imagine a typhoon, earthquake, whatever. Infrastructure shot, sanitation's overwhelmed, debris everywhere. That's where APS shines.
Because it's portable, doesn't need a power grid, can handle almost anything.
Exactly. Plus, by reducing waste so drastically, you lower the risk of contamination, disease, which is huge after a disaster.
It's mind-blowing. This tech, from a small workshop in Indonesia, could help communities A&D disaster zones worldwide. Speaks volumes about the people behind it.
And get this, it's just the beginning. Our sources say Kang Teddy and his team, they've got big plans.
Even bigger than turning trash into roads. What else can you do?
They're working on making APS even more mobile. Picture a system you can tow anywhere, no need for roads even.
Now that would be a game changer, bringing this tech directly to those who need it most.
Right. And they're looking into renewable energy integration to make it even more sustainable.
It's inspiring, you know? This coming from Subang, not exactly known for being a tech hub, really shows innovation can come from anywhere.
Exactly. Local knowledge, determination. Kang Teddy saw a problem, and well, he might end up changing the world because of it.
That's what's so great about these deep dives. It's not just about some new gadget. It's about new ways of thinking about waste, about community, about what's possible.
Totally agree.
APS shows how solutions can pop up in unexpected places, and a simple idea can snowball into something huge. So we got to ask you, have you come across any cool solutions like APS where you live? What are you doing to deal with waste?
Yeah, let us know.
Share your thoughts, your experiences on social media. Keep this conversation going because, hey, maybe we can inspire each other to create a cleaner, better future.